All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're not just looking at another software update or some slightly tweaked algorithm. We are literally about to dissect a complex digital organism known as Captain Aegis. We're pulling back the curtain on an architecture so incredibly advanced, it doesn't just process data, it perceives its environment, remembers its history, and fundamentally reshapes how artificial intelligence even operates.
But before we get into the actual anatomy of how this works, I want to hit you with a totally mind-bending question. How exactly do you fit 45,000 hours of human-level reasoning into just 1.5 seconds? Seriously, think about that massive scale of human effort and imagine it compressed into a tiny fraction of computational time. It sounds completely impossible, right?
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer to that impossible question is actually anchored by a deceptively small number, 78.75 gigabytes. That is the entire footprint of a staggering 1.75 trillion parameter intelligence. And it achieves this because it is literally born compressed. It doesn't generate hundreds of gigabytes of raw data just to lazily zip it down later. It folds its intelligence directly into this impossibly small footprint from the very first bit, which effectively unlocks a 10.3 million year day of cognitive compression.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The Sovereign Cognitive OS. 2. Dual-Eye Unified Perception. 3. Mapping the 4D latent space. 4. Dragon's fingerprint spatial geometry. 5. Gigatoken temporal permanence. And 6. The surgical self-awareness engine.
Section 1. The Sovereign Cognitive OS. More than a machine. This architecture completely redefines what we even think of as an AI model. A Sovereign Cognitive OS means this isn't just some clever zip file trick. It is an entirely new structural language. The parameters themselves are executable intelligence, memory relationships, training lineage, runtime traces. All of that gets transformed into a unified fabric of structured, searchable, and executable cognition.
Now, I want to aggressively clear up a common misconception right out of the gate. Captain Aegis is absolutely not a chatbot. Just look at the massive contrast. A standard chatbot generates text and essentially has zero long-term architectural memory. Captain Aegis, on the other hand, is a sovereign cognitive OS with persistent cognition. It orchestrates its own runtime, it executes tools, it plans, it reasons, and it maintains industrial execution stability. It is a fully unified operating system, end-to-end.
Section 2. Dual-Eye Unified Perception. The visual cortex.
Captain Aegis runs on this incredibly brilliant dual-eye architecture. The inner eye acts kind of like a visual neural net for internal data. It reads mathematical tensors, which are basically multidimensional data arrays, right alongside system logs, metrics, and execution flows. Meanwhile, you have the outer eye watching the physical world, reading real-time video feeds and user interfaces. Together, they create a single unified sensory field, so it's looking inward at its own health and outward at the real world simultaneously.
Section 3. Mapping the 4D latent space.
So both those eyes project everything into a massive 4D latent space. Think of this as a hidden mathematical realm where complex data takes on an actual structure. Instead of reading boring logs line by line, the system literally navigates its own data visually across 4 axes. The x-axis is sequence, meaning time. The y-axis is subsystem, tracking specific organs or modules. The z-axis is intensity, which measures confidence or magnitude. And the w-axis is the scenario, the various branches and what-ifs. It's essentially playing a 4D video game of its own internal and external reality.
Let's actually walk through the journey of a data trace to see this in action. Step 1. Ingest raw data from the dual eyes. Step 2. Project it directly into that 4D latent space we just talked about. Step 3. The system visually navigates this geometry. And step 4. It immediately routes attention to anomalies. It doesn't waste precious computational cycles reading every single thing. It just looks at the 4D field and instantly spots exactly where a process dropped or where a visual artifact popped up.
Section 4. Dragon's fingerprint spatial geometry.
There's this one defining principle here that I just love. The dragon's fingerprint is the geometry of thought, folding space so the AI can see more, store more, and retrieve more. This is genuine, awe-inspiring engineering. We're talking about fractal spatial indexing. It isn't just dumping data onto a flat grid. It is recursively folding reality so that the AI's concept of where something is and how it unfolds share the exact same mathematical structure.
So how does this actually change the shape of processing? Well, traditional vision systems use square grids, right? Which means they waste compute on the empty, useless corners. Captain Aegis completely flips this by using mathematical fractal geometry to create octagonal pixels. Because an octagon wastes almost nothing, this ensures 100% processing area utilization. It gives the system way more detail, more density, and massive compression per pixel. That is exactly what paves the way for flawless 16K video generation.
And this spatial folding creates a massive advantage called locality preservation. Because of the dragon curve geometry, things that are close together in the physical world naturally stay mathematically close together in the AI's memory. This is huge because it brilliantly prevents the system from randomly jumping all over its memory banks to find related data. If two objects are next to each other in a video frame, they are literally next to each other in the memory core.
Section 5. Gigatoken Temporal Permanence, the SPI.
1 billion tokens. Let that sink in. That is the sheer size of the gigatoken context window. To put that into perspective for you, that basically equates to a 10,000-hour permanent memory that never has to clear. So instead of juggling tiny, fragmented bits of memory, the system has this unified memory spine. It can recall a hyperspecific detail from months ago just as clearly as the sentence it processed a microsecond ago.
Now, you're probably thinking, how does the system not just crash under all that weight? It handles it through a rolling window. As time moves forward, the oldest context naturally falls off, but the active, important context stays permanently pinned. That allows future branches to be projected seamlessly. This level of temporal permanence is exactly what enables feature-length video generation or insanely complex code-based engineering without the AI ever losing the narrative thread or hallucinating character physics.
Section 6. Surgical Self-Awareness Engine, the Inner Coach. I have to be super clear on this point. This is absolutely not consciousness. If you had global self-awareness, where a system feels every single neuron firing, it would be wildly overwhelming and create massive compute bottlenecks. Instead, Captain Aegis uses surgical self-awareness. Think of it as a highly engineered inner coach that only activates in specific domains. It only wakes up where knowing its own state actively drives better performance and stability.
You can see there's a really strict division between allowed and restricted zones here. The organism is permitted to analyze itself in the reasoning engine and the perceptual field, because that's where self-correction easily bypasses hallucinations. But it also has restricted zones, like the identity layer and security boundaries, where self-awareness is strictly forbidden. It only ever looks inward, where it makes the overall system smarter, safer, and faster.
When you take all of this, the Dragon spatial indexing, the gigatoken memory spine, and that surgical self-awareness, you get this insane multiplier, 35x. This architecture creates an effective cognitive density 35 times greater than standard models. That right there is exactly how the system manages to compress 45,000 hours of human equivalent work into a single 1.5-second reasoning pass. It is what effectively unlocks that 10.3 million year day of cognitive compression.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap up on. We've just seen how Captain Aegis maps space perfectly and holds time persistently without ever dropping the thread. So what will humanity actually build when AI operates with this level of absolute spatial and temporal mastery? It's an absolutely fascinating frontier. Thanks for diving into this explainer with me, and keep exploring.